Hey everyone, Stanpai here with a review for Attack on Titan Chapter 89. So before I begin, I do want to say this. If you are a fan of only the anime and have not read the manga, you should not watch this video. It's filled with very intensive spoilers for the franchise. That said, we're going to go ahead and get right into it with a little bit of a recap just by saying that the last several chapters of Attack on Titan, or Attack Titan as it should be titled, have been crazy, right? Shingeki no Kyojin has definitely been worth the wait as far as information goes. We're finally getting all those answers we've been waiting for. We found out what's in the basement. We found out what's beyond the walls. We found out what these Titans really are, all these different things. We've learned about the political intrigue and history behind the world. So with that said, Chapter 89 is more information about that and also an important backstory for Ymir. So the first thing I want to say is that this chapter is quite long, being over 40 pages, and visually, it's a pretty well done chapter. I would say that a lot of that comes from the fact that it was mostly stationary dialogue scenes, which gives Isayama a lot of comfort zone to just do busts of characters from here up. That's really convenient because it does not require a lot of effort compared to having to draw intense action poses and whatnot. It's definitely a much easier sell. So that's the first comment I want to make, is that visually this is a good enough looking chapter to exclude a lot of the often negative comments one might have for Isayama's art. Getting into the chapter itself, so I just mentioned Ymir. After Eren basically has his epiphanies and learns about the Attack Titan, he gets let out of jail, and once he's out of jail, we transition over to Historia. Krista, for those, of course. Queen Historia. And she's reading a letter that was written by Ymir. Now, in this letter, Ymir gives us her backstory. And what's really interesting is, up till now, every time somebody said Ymir, 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 one would think that when they were talking of her, they were talking of this character. But it seems even Ymir, the character, being named after the goddess, the original Titan, all the amazing things that are associated with Ymir, this girl was simply a beggar on the streets who was picked up and turned into a religious icon. No different than what the wall cult would do inside of the walls. Some guy outside of the walls did this nonsense, and she spent her whole life being this religious figure, being Ymir. Whatever her real name is, we don't know. So that's really interesting because it says a lot more about the nature of the society out there, but it also tells us a lot about why she is the way she is and what her lifestyle was. What's really interesting is if we look at when she is turned into a Titan after, she's taken, thrown off of the wall, given the injection, there's a scene that's shown briefly, and there are a couple of Titans. If you remember the spin-off, Ilsa's Notebook, the Titan, the aberrant Titan that was in that sequence, looks like the same Titan. So I think that's really cool. It's just another thing. It's like pulling back from things in the past of the story and now addressing them finally. So that's really exciting. From there, we also hear that, basically by the time you read this, I'll be dead. And while Hanji can't figure out what it is, it seems like Historia has kind of put the pieces together. You idiot, what are you doing? What is Ymir going to be doing? So I'm not quite sure what the reason is for her to be killed, but we're going to find out pretty soon, I'm sure. She, as it says, may already be dead, given that she wasn't there for the final battle with the Colossal Titan. So there's a lot there to wonder about. What did she do exactly? What thing did she do? So moving forward, there's a lot of the other half of the story, the main conflict, right? This overarching, why are the Titans attacking, all these different things. It turns out it's just always been a race war, basically. And the Marley and the Eldian people have been in a conflict for generations. So there are a lot of interesting things that happen here, but basically, using the information that they gather from Grisha Yeager's notebooks, and what Eren has basically been able to infer from his own memories, that are someone else's, they're able to put the pieces together. There's a war coming. The Marley are going to attack this island. And before they do it, they want to take the Titan power that allows them to control the Titans just so they don't have to really worry about the feud that's going to go down. There's a lot of talk of a truce with the original king, or the 145th king or whatnot, that basically ran off to the island and founded everything and took the people's memories, and then as part of the truce, all the people who are successors to this particular king, they are forced to essentially adhere to the king's will and bend to it, even though this person's been dead for years. So that's really interesting as well. So moving forward, what's next? What does this all mean? So taking a look at my notes, when it comes down to the actual means to control the ability of the original Titan, right? The coordinate, as we've been hearing for many, many years, right? The power that Grisha stole and gave to Eren. Well, there is a key that Eren finally has an epiphany on how to harness that power. He remembers that when he punched the Smiling Titan, that was the moment he felt like everything was all connected at last. And then he, of course, had the second realization: the Smiling Titan was Dina, his own father's ex-wife, with royal blood within her. So the reason that's significant is we have Eren, who's not of royal blood, in contact with royal blood, and thus, by physically being in contact, he was able to activate the ability and control the Titans. Now, he doesn't really understand that this might be all it's required. In his mind, he's thinking, does that mean I have to eat Historia to get her blood? Do I have to consume her to get this ability? Well, my opinion is that this actually is something that can happen just basically with them tag teaming. If all it took was punching the hand of Dina's Titan, then why not just be the attack Titan with Historia like standing on your shoulder, and that's how you do it. And suddenly it'll work. By being physically in contact with the blood in some way, that's enough. I mean, there's enough crazy sci-fi nonsense going on in this biological warfare that's going on. But there's one last thing. Oh, so it's also worth noting, it was interesting that in looking at this, Hanji, after Eren has his outburst in the courtroom, or in the panel room, essentially discussing all of this, she's able to infer, based on the reaction that she has, she's able to infer what Eren might have figured out, or that he figured something out. But she covers for him, says, oh, it's just him acting out at that age, and is able to dissuade or diffuse the situation. Moving forward, what's next? So, I do believe that they will find a way to harness that power. I think Hanji has some insight, and I think that in the future, they're going to be able to do this thing. Now, it's also interesting, we finally know exactly what it meant when Reiner warned them that it's going to be hell inside of the walls soon. It's because the war is coming. And just as I've always believed, when they saw the Beast Titan, they knew that was like the death knells and the symbol of war is coming. That's why they activated their plan immediately. Now, we of course still have Annie crystallized somewhere, and Isayama's very good at touching up on things that are important. So, the last thing that we have to look back on here, and this is very significant because it's the very last panel, after the owl tells Grisha what he needs to do, he concludes that he needs to love his family, and also that he needs to be mindful that he can save everybody, including Armin and Mikasa. Now, obviously, this sequence does not take place in a time where Armin and Mikasa exist. And the owl is unable to answer the question of who they are. Whose memories are these? So this is super important because we have to remember what the very first chapter is called. To you, 2,000 years in the future, or something of that effect, right? Looking back. This has always been here. This information, this memory has been passed down through time. It transcends time itself. So we have a really interesting narrative going now of what this really could mean. But at the end of the day, we can only wait and see. My theory right now is similar to in Mortal Kombat when Raiden is able to basically, in Mortal Kombat 9, he sends a message to himself from Mortal Kombat Armageddon, warns him of the future, sends the message back. I feel as though there's some sort of cyclical memory process that goes on where history repeats itself by essentially passing on through people's memories. And this particular line of memories belongs to the Attack Titan line, whereas the royal family has its own separate line of memories. And I'm curious to see if any other characters will start developing memories of their own, like Armin, now that he has the Colossal Titan's ability. So anyway, that is my personal take on this new chapter. Overall, I think it was great. I loved how much content was in it. I think the art was acceptable as well. And just seeing the number of Survey Corps left is crazy. It's 9 left. That's it. Also interesting was that, the whole theory that Pixis had forever ago about the nature of the origin of the Titans. Well, maybe Pixis knows a thing or two. That's a crack theory, though. Let's not go ahead in that. That one's more of like a side note. But as far as everything else goes, that is my take on Attack on Titan Chapter 89. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. Please support the official release. Look forward to it. And of course, for those of you who haven't, look forward to Season 2. And if you've watched this video and have not read the manga, sorry? Thank you for joining me. This has been the Manly Stanley Stanpai, and that is my review of Attack on Titan Chapter 89.